First Final Fantasy, then Mario, and now Castlevania. 2010 seems to be the year that many classic franchises died for me. Yeah, this is not a nice review, because Castlevania Lords of Shadow is not a good game. It's not even average. It's a really disappointing entry into the Castlevania series and a sign of things to come, which is why it's time for me to let go of Castlevania, just like I did recently with Final Fantasy and Mario. There's no denying I'm a Castlevania fan. Super Castlevania 4 and Castlevania Symphony of the Night are two of my favorite games of all time, and I've played many other Castlevania games on the NES, Genesis, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Saturn, and PSP over the years. Many of them were really good. In short, I'm well aware of what Konami has done in the past with the franchise and what it needed to do with the next-gen Castlevania to save the franchise. As a last resort, Konami internally acknowledged their inability to make a good 3D Castlevania game and enlisted the folks at Mercury Steam Entertainment, a development studio in Spain, and even Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame to take a stab at the newest, expensive installment. This was to be the best effort yet by Konami to make sure the Castlevania series could play in the 3D arena now and not be laughed at. Sadly though, they somehow, yet again, did a half-assed job. So much so that they couldn't even keep my interest long enough to finish Lords of Shadow. And to make things worse, Lords of Shadow is a complete series reboot. So Castlevania fans who are unhappy with Lords of Shadow's offerings can expect more of it from this point on. And what is it? Well, that would be a generic fantasy world with cliched monsters, naked fairies and pregnant demons, retarded chupacabra thieves, werewolves galore, and ring wraith wannabes. Oh, and let's not forget the dreadfully boring story. Concerning controls, I hate Lords of Shadow in this department. The controls flat out suck. If you're not playing, let me see what I need to with the camera, you're getting stupid pointless actions thrown at you that should have been either simple QuickTime events or just incorporated into the game. For instance, why do I need to learn how to sprint? To dash jump over large distances, you say? Well then why not just make the gaps not as wide? And what about turning levers, cowhead mechanisms, etc.? Can't we just throw a switch and be on our way? Same with cobweb catwalks. Why even include that? Why add this to a game where action is supposed to be the main thing? Perhaps that's my problem. Me thinking Lords of Shadow would be an all-out action game like the old-school Castlevania titles. Instead, it's a stupid Uncharted clone that turns Gabriel into Nathan Drake for most of each level when you're not fighting enemies, and you gotta spend the majority of the time being a freaking monkey, hopping and hanging from ledges. I hated this in Lords of Shadow, just like I hated that aspect of the game that's so blatantly ripped off. I should briefly mention the game's best point, the visuals. Despite the erratic frame rate that seems stuck in the low 20s with the rare spike to 60 frames per second, the environments were always a pleasure to look at. And sound-wise, the voice acting was average, with Patrick Stewart being the only thing worth listening to. And even then, the writers had him drone on far too long between levels. The music was standard fare, Lord of the Rings, medieval, film soundtrack-ish stuff. Not bad, but not memorable either. This was not a Castlevania game. This was some rubbish bargain bin value game with the Castlevania name slapped on. Besides some extremely minor connections to Castlevania games, floating bat imps with lamps in cave, chain whip weapon, Belmont name, etc., there is next to nothing Castlevania fans will find enjoyable. It's to Castlevania what Final Fantasy XIII was to the Final Fantasy series.